elsewhere. The controversy around the carbon tax and the changes to the carbon tax and how that fueled a lot of support and some change in the support back to the Liberals. So I'm really waiting for that 9:30 hour when the big enchilada of the votes close, when we start to see, Quebec, Ontario, to see how things really move.
Kathleen makes a good point about Atlantic Canada, Scott. It was probably the first region to turn on Justin Trudeau, largely due to the carbon tax. We talked about Ken McDonald. There were, Sean Fraser wasn't running, then he was. Wayne Long wasn't running, now he is. What are you watching for as this is unfolding right now?
Well, right now you're looking at these numbers, and if you're the Conservatives, you have to say this is outstanding. Let's hope that this trend holds up across the country. But they also have to hope that it holds up in Atlantic Canada. And it's not just that it's early. It's many of these numbers that are on the board are based on 1, 2, 3, 5 polls. So it could change remarkably. But I am struck by the fact that this is a part of the country where you have an older demographic, and that was supposed to be money for the Liberals tonight. Like, if you're over 55, you're supposed to be voting Liberal, and this would not be an indication that you'd be thrilled with so far.
Okay, more analysis to come, but early, still indicative of something.
Certainly, and just before we go to break, in Long Range Mountains in Newfoundland, we are declaring a Conservative gain in that riding. So again, those results trickling, but we are able to make some declarations. We're going to take a quick break. We'll see you in just a few moments' time. Stay with us.
Let's go now to Montreal. My colleague Matsumi Takahashi. Sumi?
Todd? Montreal now. Montreal is a Liberal stronghold. There are 18 seats on this island. The Liberals hold 15 of them. And some polls have Liberal support in the greater Montreal area at around 50%. The Liberals are hoping to make even more gains, though, in this region and at the expense of the Bloc. Two of the ridings they've targeted: Chateauguay, Lesjardins, Nat-Pierre-Bill. It's on Montreal's South Shore. The Liberal candidate there is Nathalie Provost. She's a high-profile anti-gun activist. She's also a survivor of the École Polytechnique massacre. Also on the South Shore, Longueuil, Saint-Hubert. Now, this is an area that the Liberals haven't held since 1980. It usually swings between the Bloc and the NDP, but the polls now are showing that it's actually leaning Liberal. So we'll see how that plays out. And we go to Ottawa now. Patricia?
All right, Matsumi, thank you. We do have some interesting ridings to watch here in Ottawa, beyond just where the leaders.
Conservative gains so far in Atlantic Canada as these polls start to trickle in, and some Liberal losses at this point. Amanda, look, the economy became probably, if there's one thing underpinning that ballot box competition over what the question is it Trump or is it change? It's the economy, right?
That's right. And typically, of course, we know when people go to the polls, they're voting on their pocketbook, and that often works against the incumbent, especially after a period like the one we've seen. We saw high inflation. We saw the after effects of a global pandemic. So the vote for change was very powerful. And then into the mix, you get, well, now we feel threatened and we need to defend ourselves against a trade war. And that, of course, was the wild card that we've been dealing with. Underneath it all, though, people still, at the end of the day, when they're checking off that ballot, they're thinking about their own situation. And there's so much uncertainty right now. So it does come down to stewardship, I think. Who will manage our economy better?
Have you been surprised by the whiplash? I mean, there are days in the past couple of weeks where we've seen the size of Canada's GDP just wiped out on stock markets. And when, if you're younger, you've got time to make up that money. Yeah. If you're a senior in this country who's worked their entire life preparing for the golden years, and to see that evaporate in mere moments, I mean, it's not easy to stomach.
It's been jarring in the extreme. And I think I said this to you, Omar, on your program, which is even on the days when it was up 5, 6, 7%. That's not a good day. That doesn't feel rational or normal or the way stocks should move. And it speaks to the level of uncertainty in the world. And we're starting to see this show up in the economy. Even if you waved a wand and it was all over today, we have damage done. And the damage will persist for our economy and elsewhere. And, you know, we're talking here in Atlantic, Canada about St. John, the hardest hit place for tariffs in the country.
96% of their exports go to the U.S.
Go to the U.S. And of course, a very integrated economy too. They come back as well in the form of sort of refined products. So all of this is going to be in the mix, but it's really interesting to watch at the end of the day. How do people feel about what they're voting on, and how regional will that be at the end?
And as far as what the parties are pitching, what stands out to you in that regard?
So it was interesting to see, and we'll talk mostly about Liberal PC because that's, you know, who's going to likely form the government here. And both of them were really making the case for, we'll get you through this, but such different approaches. Liberals, big spending, really focused on a trade war, throwing money at a problem, not so much worried about the fiscal balance. And the Conservatives taking that same message that they've had all along, which is we want to downsize government, we want to reduce your taxes. So that the kind of undertone was, yeah, sure, there's a trade war, but remember, we're the guys that are going to deliver something different here. And we'll see whether that works in terms of the messaging and how it gets read in the end by what people actually absorbed. You know, economists, the balance is out in terms of which one will succeed, because in both platforms, there was a lot of unknown quantities. Where does the revenue come from? Where do the cuts come? We don't really know any of those things. But voters actually were hearing more, and maybe this is intentional, of course, more of the subtext than the actual details.
Magic math all over.
Exactly.
And we'll see what they choose. But I've got to thank you, by the way. The past 2 weeks have been, it's been a seesaw, but you've been our voice of calm and our voice of reason in a very strange and different environment. So, Amanda, we'll check in with you in just a bit later. Let's head over to Sandy right now, who's been keeping with the pulse of the people.
Well, Omar, it's interesting. We were listening to Corey and Scott bring up the age factor, and I want to talk about that with our talk people here, because older Canadians tend to vote Liberal by a huge percentage. Those 35 to 54 prefer the Conservatives. And then there's the youth vote. Conservatives are resonating with young people. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, the callers and the listeners tend to be a little bit older quite often, but I do have a lot of very engaged young people. And Justin Lang wrote this great column for the Toronto Star about why Donald Trump won. And it was a lot about sort of the bro culture and what young men are sick of, what they're afraid of, that they don't have job security, that never get a pension, they can't find a girl. I don't know if Pierre Poilevre is going to solve that, but the presumption these days is Conservatives solve those things.
But I think, and this goes back to what you were saying before in our last chat about people being angry, right? Because if you look at the Liberals, is it the same party, just different leaders? So if they're angry about the potential of the Liberals winning.
What I noticed in the last couple of days is that some of the older audience who I mentioned had become a bit defensive of Mark Carney. In the early days, the Conservatives were running against a resume, and it's a really good resume. And as they got to know him a little bit, I think they saw he had a cranky side. He was mean to reporters. Look inside yourself. I don't think that played very well with older people. So that started to soften up a little bit. But the anger of younger people played in, too. When the platforms got costed, I started to get emails and texts from people, younger people, saying, look at the debt he's going to put us into. So Trump went a little quieter. And then the economy became the issue again a little bit more. It's what I was saying earlier about musical chairs. And, you know, if the music had kept playing for another week, where would we be? There was a little bit of a shift coming. You start to see that a little bit from Atlantic Canada, maybe. Does that hold as we move on into the areas where we talk to people every day on there? I'm not sure yet, but it's gone back and forth. There's been a real ebb and flow. And I think if young people are as angry as I heard them, they traditionally don't come out to vote, right? Older people get out and vote. Younger people are busy. I think a lot of younger people were angry enough that they made a point of it, especially when there was a long weekend to do it.
Right. All right. We wait and see and we watch. All right. Omar.
All right, Sandy, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll see you soon in just a couple minutes.
The Ram 1500 wins on highways, on driveways. It wins in the backcountry and back in the city. Ram wins in quality and capability. No wonder it won Motor Trend's 2025 Truck of the Year. Right now, enjoy pre-tariff pricing on all existing inventory.
special coverage here at CTV News of election 2025. We want to head straight to party headquarters to get a sense, just an hour out from polls closing in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nunavut, and Northwest Territories, of how things are unfolding. Let's go straight to Geneviève Beauchemin. She's with the Liberals in Ottawa this evening. Hi, Geneviève.
Hi, Vashi. Well, you know, there's not a lot of people in this room right now. It's pretty quiet. The Liberal Party has said that there's about 750 people who have RSVP'd. They will be here, but they're saying that right now it's quiet because they want their volunteers to be out there. They want them to be pulling out the vote, knocking on doors, getting every single person that could be voting out voting, and then people will start to trickle into this room. We've been hearing that the buzzword of the night is cautious optimism, that in fact that there has been that, you know, people are cautiously optimistic that there will be getting out the vote, that things will go out for the Liberal Party. But of course, as the night goes on, they'll come to see those numbers here and they'll try to analyze that board. I keep looking out into the room here, trying to see whether I can read any faces, whether that sort of cautious optimism is shifting as people are still trying to figure out how this early night is going so far, Vashi.
Okay, thanks so much, Geneviève. Yeah, lots to discern. Atlantic Canada providing us, though, with some interesting results so far. I think it's safe to say that this is a better result than the Conservatives, as James was mentioning earlier, than the Conservatives or polling would have anticipated. Interesting to see how advanced polls and obviously what happens in Central Canada, Central and Western Canada when the next polls close affect that.
And we'll see if this trend sweeps across the entire country. Let's head on over to Abigail Beeman with the Conservatives. And in the room where you're at, Abigail, is there a sense of optimism? I mean, I'm sure there is, but how much optimism at this stage?
Well, I can tell you things have certainly shifted in a big way, just in terms of the mood on the floor. Since I last spoke to you, a lot more people are now in this room and they are getting excited. So we're hearing a lot of cheers, close watching of the screen. Also interesting, speaking to a campaign source who was sort of managing expectations, saying, hey, you know, we don't expect things to get off to, there may be a slow start in Atlantic Canada. That same source then coming back and saying, hey, things are better than expected. So even, you know, outperforming what the party's own internal numbers were expecting there. So some optimism as well. And the point there was, hey, we're waiting to see what Ontario and BC have in store because we're expecting things to really pick up there. So definitely some optimism, although, of course, the caveat that things are early still. But these Atlantic Canada numbers are outperforming Conservative campaign expectations. And another thing of note, Conservative campaign saying that what they are looking to as well is that their internal numbers are telling them that they have a real advantage in terms of new voters, and how they define new voters are voters who have not voted in the last 2 elections but are now planning not only to vote but to vote Conservative. So that's something that they will be watching for as well.
All right, Abigail, thank you. So Vashi, of course, the people in that room, the crowd picking up on some of that optimism that we talked about earlier. But the big battlegrounds, of course, in this election are Ontario and BC, and Ontario polls will be closing there in about an hour and 5 minutes time.
Exactly.
So a big wave of results expected in just over an hour.
Yeah, very much anticipating that. It'll be a little bit later where Judy Trin is with the NDP in Burnaby in British Columbia. Judy, what can you tell us about how things are going there?
Well, just like it's happening across the country right now, there are a few people here because most of the NDP volunteers are out trying to get the vote, trying to make sure their supporters are going to the polls. The polls here don't close until 7 p.m. Pacific, or that's 10 p.m. Eastern. At that point, their government could already be determined, right? So we're not expecting to hear from Jagmeet Singh until then, but he's already making a comment on Twitter or X. I want to point this out to you, because if his theme, and I think the theme for the party is the joyful struggle, hope, and a prayer, basically. In his X post, he features a photo of him and Jack Layton, and it says, remember what Jack said, don't tell them it can't be done. Of course, Singh is referring to the Orange Wave in 2011 when we saw the collapse of the Liberals and Stephen Harper majority, and the NDP formed the opposition. So that is not going to happen this time. In fact, the NDP could face what could be their worst showing ever, putting the job of Jagmeet Singh on the line. I spoke to the chief of staff for the NDP, Jennifer Howard, a few minutes ago, and what she told me is, regardless of what happens, there is so much respect and admiration for Mr. Singh that if he's not going to be pushed out, that they will leave space for him to decide on his own as to what he will do. But this is the reality that they are facing right now. I will say that the NDP tell me that their internal polling shows that they will do much better than what the pollsters we've been interviewing, we've been talking to, including across the country. Their internal numbers are showing much better. They believe they can win between 12 and 15 seats. So that's yet to materialize, Vashi.
All right, thanks so much, Judy. Definitely the NDP believe their vote is more efficient than the polls represent, which is, of course, what happened in the Ontario case example a number of weeks ago, Omar.
Yes, that's right. And we've got Jeremy Charles standing by with the Bloc Québécois in Montreal tonight. And after Ontario, Jeremy, as we know, Quebec has the second largest seat share after Ontario. BC has the third. What's it like in the room where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, Omar, lots to gain, lots to lose in Quebec, right? With such a large seat share. We're starting to see the energy build up in the room here at Bloc headquarters in Montreal. Supporters have started to come in, seeing some Quebec flags, of course. The big hope here among MPs, among the leader, Yves-François Blanchet, is that the party can hold on to a bit of a surge in momentum that they have seen towards the end of this campaign. They struggled early on. The focus of this campaign has been largely on Donald Trump, the threat of tariffs, things that make it hard for a party leader who is the leader of a Quebec nationalist party to position himself in that kind of situation. And so what we saw him do kind of midway through this campaign or towards the debate is switch the messaging a little bit. Start to talk to Quebecers about the fact that he believes, he's been saying for weeks now, Yves-François Blanchet, he believes that Mark Carney and the Liberals will form government and that Bloc voters can be safe to return to vote for the Bloc and send Bloc MPs to Ottawa to try and prioritize Quebec's priorities. That is the hope here. The party is really hoping that they'll be able to hold on to that positive momentum they experienced kind of towards the end of the campaign rather than the struggles they faced early on. Of course, the big question is where will they stand at the end of this night? At dissolution, they had 33 seats. There was talk early on they could drop under 20 seats. There's a lot of talk now. They're hoping to land somewhere between 20 and 30. That will be kind of the barometer that we'll be watching tonight to see how the party feels. But there could be a big impact here, Omar and Vashi, when it comes to the outcome of this election. Depending on how many seats the Bloc perhaps loses to the Liberals, it could also kind of be a difference maker when it comes to whether we see a majority or a minority government.
All right, Jeremy, thank you so much. And he makes a great point. You know, if there is a hit tonight with the Bloc Québécois, how big will that hit be? And a fascinating story, I think, in Quebec, the fact that there are former Bloc supporters who now feel that Quebec interests are now better served with another party other than the Bloc this time around. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, if that does materialize. I know those artificial country comments also resonating or getting a reaction out of other parts of the country as well. Speaking of other parts of the country, let's head over to Victoria, where Rob Buffum is stationed this evening with the Green Party. We were talking survival earlier with Judy Trin. Same conversation has to come up with the Greens. Rob.
Absolutely. We're at Elizabeth May's headquarters here at a winery in the Saanich Peninsula where a few people are starting to trickle in and they're setting up for a celebration. But at the same time, they're also bracing for what could be a very tough night for the Green Party and for Elizabeth May herself. They're facing some headwinds that they're well aware of, including the fact that they did not have a leader in the leaders' debate. Elizabeth May has said that's something that she feels made it very hard for them to get their platform any attention. And they're also concerned about the strategic voting that we've heard about for weeks, the idea that progressive voters may park their vote this time around with either the Conservatives or the Liberals. Sources tell me the Greens would be very happy to have 3 MPs elected tonight. Mike Morris, if they could hold on to that seat, Elizabeth May, as well as they're hoping to pick up Paul Manley here on the island, who has previously won. They also acknowledge this could be a night that we come out of with 0 Green MPs, including their co-leader, Elizabeth May. But at the same time, she's somebody who cannot be underestimated. Punching through in 2011, a local radio personality told her she didn't stand a chance of being elected dog catcher, and she's certainly proven that person wrong and is very popular in this riding. The polls close in just under 2 hours, so we'll have to see. But it's going to be a big night for the Greens, including for their leader.
Yeah, very much so. Thanks so much, Rob. So polls close there in a couple of hours, but in much of the rest of the country in an hour. And we've got some declarations, including in New Brunswick, Minister Dominic Lamont, who served in a million different capacities over the last 4 years, holds his seat. No surprise there. Definitely a safe one. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, the tally right now, even though CTV News has made the declaration, I think, if I saw correctly, was about 900 votes. In the riding of St. John's East, we're declaring that Joanne Thompson will be reelected in that riding. And then here is how the numbers break down right now. She has a lead of about 1,132 votes. Again, 40 of the 197 polls reporting. But again, CTV News making that declaration that she is keeping her seat in that riding.
And then we can also declare that the Conservative incumbent, in Acadie-Annapolis is reelected, Chris D'Entremont, with a lead, about 55 polls reporting, but we are at the point where we can make that declaration. His lead, nearly 1,000 votes at this point.
And let's head over right now to CTV's Maya Johnson, who is in Hunsik-Cartierville tonight, which is a riding that was held at dissolution by the Global Affairs Minister, Mélanie Joly. Maya.
Hi, Omar. There is certainly a lot of activity here in the borough, in the riding office of Mélanie Joly here in Hunsik-Cartierville. You can see lots of supporters, volunteers behind me watching the results come in on a screen that's being projected on the wall to my right. And we have Mélanie Joly, the outgoing Minister of Foreign Affairs, with us right now. Thank you, Madame Joly, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
First off, we're starting to see results come in from Atlantic Canada. What's your reaction to that? Any disappointment?
Well, no, of course. We know it's going to be a long night. We know that. And every single riding counts. I've been in contact with many of my colleagues that are quite confident, but of course, we can take nothing for granted. And it's the same here in Quebec, and it's the same in Ontario, and it's the same across the country. It will be a very long night, but an exciting one.
Okay, and of course we know that the ballot box question appears to be the relationship between Canada and the U.S. and these threats that are coming from the Trump administration. And even today, we saw President Donald Trump post on social media talking once again about the possibility of Canada becoming the 51st state on Election Day when people are going to the polls. What did she think of that?
Well, listen, it's not the first time, and it's not going to be the last one that President Trump has opinions regarding Canada. He has repeatedly stated his threats of annexation, and as well has started a trade war against Canada, which is putting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs at risk across the country. And, you know, I was in Hamilton and in the Niagara region last week. Of course, people in the steel sector and the auto sector are very, very concerned. We know that there's been already closures of some plants, and we know that there's a lot of anxiety. But that's why the ballot question tonight is clearly who is the right prime minister and who is the right team to handle Trump, to deal with his rhetoric. And the answer is clear. It is Mark Carney and the Liberal team.
And last week, Mr. Carney was here in the Montreal area in Laval. There was a big Liberal rally there. And at that rally, you asked voters to give the Liberals a majority mandate. And I believe it's the first time that we heard that, the possibility of a majority. Are you hopeful still that that is a possibility?
We can never take anything for granted. What is really important is President Trump only respects strength. That's the only thing that that we can really show in the context of negotiations that can be to our advantage. And of course, having a majority government would definitely be extremely helpful.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you again for your time, Mélanie Joly. We appreciate it. Back to you in studio.
All right, Maya, thank you so much. And Mélanie Joly, of course, was one of the names that was floated to possibly run or to make a run for the leadership of the Liberal Party. She decided to step back to focus on a file which has dominated this campaign, of course, which is the Canada-U.S. trade file, Ashley.
Yeah, that's what she said. She might end up running another time, but yes, that was the reason that she had preferred. Same one as François-Philippe Champagne, who ended up being finance minister, both of them taking the lead on that file. Let's swing over as these results from Atlantic Canada, you can see them on the bottom of your screen, begin to become a little clearer to our strategists, Corey Tonight, Kathleen Monk, and Scott Reid. Scott, your read on where things sit right now in Atlantic Canada, how much do we take from it?
I think we may be overreading it. Obviously, on a seat total, the Conservatives are outperforming expectations. But if you look at the popular vote all across the Atlantic, where the votes have been cast so far, Liberals are running at 50%. Conservatives are running at 44%. So that's solid showing. The NDP, I'm sorry to say, Kathleen, have gone fishing. So we are looking at a 6-point gap for the Liberals over that. I think some of these seat totals will probably realign. Look at a riding like Sean Fraser's right now. Advance votes aren't in, not the whole riding, obviously by a large stretch. And, you know, if the Liberals, you ask yourself, well, what does this tell us about the rest of the country? Well, if what this tells us about the rest of the country is the Liberals are going to be topping out at polling expectations, which is what 50% will put them at in this region. And if they're running 6% ahead of the Conservatives, they're going to like a lot what happens to them come BC and Ontario. So I'm not convinced that this is necessarily as demoralizing for the Liberals as it might appear.
I think the reason that maybe people are looking, that we're all looking at what this might mean is because the expectation, particularly in Atlantic Canada, Kathleen, was that things had swung even more so to the Liberals, and that would translate through efficiency to, you know, flipping some seats, for example. We saw in Central Nova that one of the ones they were focused on didn't end up being the case.
And also, it's one of their traditional areas of strength, right? The Atlantic. And that was what's so exciting about when the Conservatives thought they were going to be sweeping the Atlantic and sweeping the Rock of Newfoundland. And so this flip, or at least it looks like it might be, you know, it's still too early to tell. But, and New Democrats, to be clear, never expected, you know, we had some hopes for Halifax, certainly. And that's certainly disappointing. I mean, there's a riding. Alexa McDonough used to run in that riding. Megan Leslie ran there. And Lisa Roberts, not that long ago, right? And there were days, you know, when I used to work on the Hill where we used to have Peter Stauffer, Yvonne Gaudin, Jack Harris, many other candidates. But it hasn't been an area of strength for New Democrats for some time.
It does show you, though, one of the narratives, Corey, coming into this was the coalescing of support around two parties. I know Kathleen mentions it's not like all the hopes for the NDP were pinned in Atlantic Canada, but even that popular vote that Scott described is very much a manifestation of what we saw throughout the campaign.
Yeah, I think that's right. What I find interesting in what we're seeing in these numbers is, you know, the polling averages, which are a little bit more shaky in small regions like Atlantic Canada, they're like plus minus 6%. But even on that, you're seeing the Liberals underperform by, you know, 4 or 5 points. The Conservatives overperform by 4 or 5 points. I'll be really watching to see when we get into Quebec and Ontario, where there's a lot more polling and where those polling variances are probably, you know, under 2%, whether or not you're seeing an overperformance or not. And if you are, you know, is it the new voter thing that you were talking about? Is it you know, some weakness in the Liberal campaign in the dying days? Is it the, you know, the push to pull Poilevre from ads and focus more on a party ballot question as opposed to a leadership frame in which they do perform much better? But, you know, we'll see.
Yeah, as those results do start to come in, because we've got about 50 minutes, Omar, until polls close 267 ridings, which is a huge part, obviously, of the country, and some early results coming in from Quebec now.
Yeah, so as you rightly pointed, I mean, the bulk of those results from Quebec will be coming in about 50 minutes' time, but we are getting early results from parts of Quebec. And let's take a look right now at Gaspésie, Les Îles de la Madeleine, and Listigouge, where we see that Diane Laboutier is trailing. The Liberal incumbent is trailing, and the Bloc Québécois, Alexis Deschênes, has a lead of about 60 votes right now. So as we've been saying, again, the bulk of those results from Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories will be coming in about 50 minutes' time. And that's a huge section in terms of seat counts. So we've got about 267 seats represented by those provinces. So that should be an interesting wave.
It will. And I don't know if you, but you're hearing from this, but I'm hearing from a lot of people who are trying to get stuff from Elections Canada, unable to do so. Something's going on with the website. Let's get an update from our breaking news desk. Adrian Gabriel and Rachel Aiello are on that.
Yeah, we can confirm that Canadians across the country are still experiencing issues this hour. And now, Rachel, we have some confirmation.
That's right. So Elections Canada has confirmed to us that as of 7 p.m., they were made aware that some electors are having difficulties accessing their website. They say they are currently investigating the issue. We don't know yet the nature of this outage. Elections Canada also taking to social media to let folks know that if they need to get their polling place, check your voter information card, they can contact a local Elections Canada office or hit up a 1-800 number to get that information.
And this is concerning for multiple people who've been sharing those concerns online. We see David Moscrop writing, suboptimal to have the Elections Canada site down right now. And Why is it so concerning, Rachel?
Well, beyond getting your polling place or the timing for your polling, there is so much other information for voters on Elections Canada's website, information about their candidates, information about misinformation, Adrian. They've made a big effort in this campaign to post online a lot of information debunking things they're seeing surface. So not having that accessible right now is something I'm sure Elections Canada is trying to work hard to get rectified quickly.
A concerning developing story we're going to keep an eye on.
All right, Adrian, Rachel, thank you so much. And again, important to underline here, as we have already, that despite the outage on the Elections Canada website, that does not affect the results that we are bringing you, the results that you're seeing on the bottom and to the right of your screen. So we will be updating those results in real time. This is separate from the outage happening at Elections Canada. We're going to take a quick break right now, and our coverage continues of election 2025. Stay with us. Pointed, I mean, the bulk of those results from Quebec will be coming in about 50 minutes time, but we are getting early results from parts of Quebec. And let's take a look right now at Gaspésie, Les Îles-de-la-Madeleine, and Listigouge, where we see that Diane Laboutier is trailing. The Liberal incumbent is trailing, and the Bloc Québécois, Alexis Deschênes, has a lead of about 60 votes right now. So as we've been saying, again, the bulk of those results from Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories will be coming in about 50 minutes time, and that's a huge section in terms of seat counts. So we've got about 267 seats represented by those provinces. So that should be an interesting wave.
It will, and I don't know if you're hearing from this, but I'm hearing from a lot of people who are trying to get stuff from Elections Canada, unable to do so. Something's going on with the website. Let's get an update from our breaking news desk. Adrian Gabriel and Rachel Aiello are on that.
Yeah, we can confirm that Canadians across the country are still experiencing issues this hour. And now, Rachel, we have some confirmation.
That's right. So Elections Canada has confirmed to us that as of 7 p.m., they were made aware that some electors are having difficulties accessing their website. They say they are currently investigating the issue. We don't know yet the nature of this outage. Elections Canada also taking to social media to let folks know that if they need to get their polling place, check your voter information card, they can contact a local Elections Canada office or hit up a 1-800 number to get that information.
And this is concerning for multiple people who've been sharing those concerns online. We see David Moscrop writing, suboptimal to have the Elections Canada site down right now. And why is it so concerning, Rachel?
Well, beyond getting your polling place or the timing for your polling, there is so much other information for voters on Elections Canada's website, information about their candidates, information about misinformation, Adrian. They've made a big effort in this campaign to post online a lot of information debunking things they're
Stephen Harper. I think we have another declaration, if I am correct, that we are prepared to make. Maybe not. I'll wait to see if it shows up. Maybe. Okay, we don't have it at this moment, but I promise you it's coming. We're going to throw things over to Heather, who is in studio with the State of Play. Yeah, a really exciting time, Vashi. Now, as you said, we've got those declarations coming in. Those calls happening from our decision desk. And this is where things start to really unfold. And it's really interesting to just look at the map of our country and see how it plays out in color form. We have the Liberals leading and elected in 22 ridings at the moment. The Conservatives in 10 ridings, the Bloc Québécois leading and elected in 1 riding. But behind all of the numbers would be the people. Those are you. Everybody who's perhaps at home watching and cast a ballot earlier today, the people behind the ballot. So I want to bring in Rupen Sioni of Environics Analytics. He's here with me this evening. Rupen, you're going to break down the demographics, the people behind the numbers, and you've actually divided the population into these really interesting segments.
We have. We take data on the population and estimate it down to the postal code, a rich view of demographics and finances and people's social values. And when we cross-reference that with Elections Canada data back from 2021, we get this rich portrait of different voters and how they vote in these local races. Now, it's interesting when you look at some of these segments like big city burbs, they're core Liberal voters in the Toronto and Vancouver suburbs. If you take another segment like older rustic, they're dyed-in-the-wool conservative voters in most of the country. But we've been talking a lot about Atlantic Canada,
right?
And they're a bit of a battleground in Atlantic Canada.
Absolutely. And some ridings, as we know, can include 1 or 2 segments. So you and your neighbor may be in 2 totally different segments. So we're going to zoom into Nova Scotia here, and we're actually going to look at the riding of South Shore St. Margaret's. Now, if you're not familiar with riding titles, perhaps this is the home of Lunenburg and the Bluenose, if you've had the luck to travel down there. So who lives here? Who are these voters?
Well, the primary segment here is that older rustic that I just mentioned. So these are retirees or people contemplating retirement. They tend to be on the lower middle income scale, and they make up most of this riding. Now, remember, in this riding, the Conservatives won by about 8 points back in 2021. You've got a lot of people here who are considering retirement. They're on modest incomes. If you look at the impact of the tariffs and the current environment here, they tend to be in jobs that are high risk and they have high financial vulnerability. So they're going to be concerned about what's to come to finance their lifestyles.
And patriotism. When it comes to being a proud Canadian, they're all in.
Well, emotions matter, right? In this election, as we've seen, they're very patriotic. They've got high Canadian pride. They're willing to pay more for Canadian products.
And something else, sorry, Rupin, very important to people in Nova Scotia is healthcare as well.
Absolutely. So a lot of people here, as they age, are in fair or poor health. So they're going to be looking for who they think is going to best maintain that healthcare system.
Okay, and look how close it is, Rupin. So we have the Conservative incumbent, Rick Perkins, in the lead at the moment by just 102 votes. So a really tight race happening here between these 2 segments of the population.
That's right. It'll be interesting to see if the polling says with the NDP vote going elsewhere potentially this time, where that goes and whether the Liberals could pick this up.
Okay, a very tight race in this one riding. Back to you.
It's fascinating data when you look at it, Vashti, because it shows you what are the ballot box issues, what's driving people to the polls, even though the dominant narrative in this election has been one person, Donald Trump, south of the border. It is important, but there are so many other issues at play too in this election.
Yeah, people really care about their cost of living and what's going to happen with that.
Absolutely. Let's take it over to Anne-Marie with her panel. Anne-Marie.
Well, I'm not older or rustic, I don't think anyway, but I'm heading fast in that direction. Let's talk about, again, the people in these ridings. And if we're looking at both the riding that the Conservatives have flipped and the ones that they possibly could, there's a story that's developing across the country, and that is that urban and rural divide. Tom, I see you nodding there. You and I were having this conversation earlier.
I completely agree with what you're saying, because we talk about divisions based on provinces and resource producing provinces versus industrial and so forth. But you notice across Canada that there is a big division between the large urban centers and the rural areas. The large urban centers tend to be dominated by the Liberals, think Toronto, Montreal. But in the outlying areas, in Ontario and in Quebec, you see a lot of blue. In Quebec, it could be 2 shades of blue. It could be conservative or bloc. Yeah. But it's a reality across Canada. And whatever else happens tonight, when we come out of this election, there's going to have to be some bridge building. And it's not just province to province. I think we have to take into account the reality of rural Canada as well. And I don't think we do that enough. I live in the country, by the way.
Yeah. James, you're nodding there.
Yeah, sure. And that's part of it, like bridging the 2 conversations, that and the numbers that we're looking at here, right? There are polls that are coming in. We assess them 22-10, the seat totals now. But we don't know which of those polls are, right? If the rural ones are coming in, that may be more accretive to one political party or another. But starting off the broadcast, I said, in 2015, Justin Trudeau won 32 of 32 Atlantic seats. That didn't happen. Stephen Harper won 14 of 32 seats when we won a majority in 2011. That didn't happen. Conservative vote floor is high. And it's higher this election than it was in last election. We've got more votes, a couple more seats we'll see. But if more votes is more efficient in the other provinces, that could be a very good night for the Conservatives. But we'll have to wait and see.
I know everybody here understands that language, but for the people at home, when we're talking about vote floor, what does that mean? Can you explain that?
The minimum number of seats that the Conservatives are most likely to win. That floor of the minimum number of seats is higher. It's gotten it was higher under Andrew Scheer than it was in 2015 under Stephen Harper. It got higher under Aaron O'Toole. The floor was, the efficiency of the vote wasn't there. Pierre Poilevre has raised it higher. So the question is now, if it's 22-10 out of the 32 seats in Atlantic Canada, if the vote is more efficient in the rest of the country than it seems like it so far is in Atlantic Canada, if that vote, because I think in the popular vote, it's 50-43 right now. 50 Liberal, 43. That's good for the Liberals. It's also very good for the Conservatives. Nick Nanos, there's not a single pollster in the country, not one, that said the Conservatives would be at 43% Atlantic Canada.
Right.
Again, early, we'll see. We don't know if that's suburban, urban, or rural. We'll know that in the fullness of time. But if that 43 number and the velocity of that Conservative vote spills into the other provinces and they turn out and it's more efficient in other parts of the country, like the 905, like 604, 416, then that could mean we might have a very good night for the Conservatives. But we'll have to wait.
What would the Conservatives have to do, Rana, maybe I'll throw this to you, in order to speak directly to the voters in that part of the country? Issues with around fisheries, for example, and the idea of who's going to protect our industry, who's the leader who can best do that? Where do they have to reach out? Where do they have to convince them that maybe there needs to be a change?
I mean, they did. Pierre announced doubling of funding for small craft harbors. There hadn't been new funding and investment in that for quite some time. He supported the LNG project in Newfoundland and Labrador. Remember, Mark Carney not only said no to the 5 demands from the energy sector, he also is introducing a larger industrial carbon tax and a brand new carbon tax, which is a tariff adjustment on the border. So everything coming in from imports coming into Canada will be taxed, tariffed for carbon. So people that understand energy understand what that means. Anyone who works in heavy industry understands what that means. Not everybody was talking about this, but people in the energy sector were talking about this. So interesting to see if that resonated with voters, if they understood that this is an attack on industry across Canada, but specifically an attack on.
In this election, we've really noticed how age really is going to make a difference here. So older voters have been really worried about stability, about the safety of their savings, all of those things related to the Trump issue. That's been good for Carney. Young voters have been really interested in what's going on with some of the things that Ron has been talking about. How do I get a house? How do I get a job? How do I build my wealth? So there's an issue there, I think, with the voter intensity, the number of them that are likely to show up. And what's been interesting in an older region like the Atlantic Canada, to see the Conservatives do as well as they have. I will say, I'm watching closely David Miles, who's a great Canadian songwriter, who's doing very, very well in Fredericton. And I think that's a good example of how a young candidate, kind of can transcend some of those trends that you're seeing out there. And the other one, of course, is Lisa Harris and Miramichi. It's a very close race out there. The woman's a firecracker. And if she wins that riding, it's good for the Liberals tonight.
That's a firecracker coming from a firecracker.
Absolutely.
Harjit, what would you like to say?
Oh, when it comes to the Atlantic, I think when we look at the urban-rural areas and you boil it down to the individual families, and somebody's casting their vote, they're looking at what, regardless of age, they're going to be looking at how it's going to be impacting me. Yeah. And I think in the Atlantic provinces, it contrasts significantly in the rural urban areas. I mean, Goody Hutchings, when I worked with her, she really kind of emphasized the importance of what we needed to do. For example, when there's a climate crisis like hurricanes that are coming up, it impacts communities very, very differently. And I know that Mark Carney's first stop was actually into the Atlantic when the campaign had started. And he understands that, there's a lot of opportunities that are out there when it comes to the energy sector as well. Yeah. How do we support small communities? But let's not also forget how the impact that Donald Trump will have on your pocketbook as well. So when we look at the challenges of the cost of living, that Donald Trump is also going to be playing into this mix as well.
The other show, when I'm not here, I'm at CTV Your Morning. So plug for our coverage tomorrow on our results day that's coming up. But I wanted to talk about, we took the show on the road to New Brunswick and to St. John in particular. And one of the big conversations there that we haven't talked about yet is the importance of immigration to that region and regions like it in Atlantic Canada. And how does that play out when we take a look at people at the ballot box and who they want to vote for?
Well, I mean, this is something that was actually very pleasantly surprised when I first got into government, how welcoming the Atlantic provinces were to immigration. Remember during the Syrian refugee crisis and the success story that became. We need good labor. The Atlantic province fully appreciate this. So you need good policies in place. You got to be able to work with the provinces. And I think the Atlantic province has actually done quite well. We did, I think... they're one
of the parts of the country saying, we want people to be here.
Absolutely.
We need more immigration.
I mean, I actually trained in Fredericton, New Brunswick when I was in the military. And it's completely different from when you visit now, right? But the thing is, when we look at immigration, we do look at it differently. We can't have it just polarizing in certain areas, and that kind of creates that negative narrative sometimes.
But, I think housing and immigration are inextricably linked in lots of parts of the country. So certainly you go to Atlantic Canada, people are incredibly welcoming. I mean, the Lebanese community is a founding community of Halifax. But you go to a city like Vancouver or Calgary or Toronto, places that are really struggling with housing, that's where the issues become more complicated. It's about settling people well, helping them immigrate, giving them an opportunity to be able to participate. And I think we will probably, post-election on your Monday, on your tomorrow show.
Tomorrow morning live.
Tomorrow morning live at 6 to 9. I think you'll probably be talking about how that ultimately affected this election result.
All right. Panel, thanks so much. I'm going to send it back to Vashti Omar.
You're not sleeping tonight, are you, Anne-Marie?
I'm not, as a matter of fact.
Straight to your show. But certainly some, Vashti, important factors here. You've got a gender divide in this country. You've got a generational divide in this country. And as Tom mentioned, too, you've got the urban-rural split happening, too. So we'll see how all that factors in when our next batch of votes come in about half an hour's time, when the bulk of those polls close. We've got some potential seat changes that we've got.
Yeah, we do. We've got some conservative pickups, some liberal losses, and an early bloc pickup as well as the very first results from Quebec start trickling in. As you mentioned, the big tranche of seats or ridings where we'll start getting results, 267 of them. We're just 33 minutes away, and you're looking here at some results coming in as well. Very tight race between the Liberal and the Conservative there. This is a significant one, Central Nova. Sean Fraser, cabinet minister for a number of years in a very tight race. We're going to keep our eye on that one. We've got a lot more coverage coming up. We're going to take a quick commercial break right here at CTV News. More special election 2025.
Welcome back to our special coverage of election 2025. In about a half an hour's time, we'll see polls close in several parts of the country: in Quebec, in Ontario, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nunavut, Northwest Territories. 267 seats up for grabs in those provinces and territories. I want to head over to Heather Butts right now. Heather, what have you got?
Omar, thank you. We are going to be taking a look at some projections for some really interesting ridings that we are looking at all evening. I'm bringing in our pollster, Nick Nanos, the man behind the numbers here for us this evening, Nick. So we're going to take a look at some interesting heats that are popping out for you tonight.
Oh, absolutely. All this has to do with kind of the intensity of support, basically across the country. And, the thing is when we're looking at some of these scenarios, the key thing, Heather, to look at is 62 ridings are too close to call. If you see on the map anything that is black, that means it's a toss-up. But, the thing is that there's still a lot of ridings that we don't know how they'll swing tonight, depending on the voter turnout and also the results of the advanced polls.
Yeah, certainly a lot of time to get through this evening, Nick, to see how it plays out. So we're going to start in Quebec. And as you mentioned, the black there, these ridings too close to call. But as we zoom into the greater Montreal area, Nick, we see that lone NDP riding.
Yep.
Yep. But then a few others at play here.
Absolutely. You can see in the South Shore of Montreal, a number of ridings that are in play fundamentally between the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals. And it speaks to kind of outside of Montreal and the South Shore, ridings that will be critical in terms of shaping the next federal government, in terms of the number of seats, and also the future of the Bloc Québécois in terms of how they perform in this particular election.
That's right. We've been talking so much about the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals, and if the Liberals can steal their votes this evening. So we're going to move on now, switching provinces, heading over to Ontario, and we're going to narrow in on the greater Toronto area. Yep. Nick, once a Liberal stronghold, not so much at the moment.
Yeah, well, still pretty good. I think compared to where they were in December, that's looking very good for the Liberals because, they were really way behind. And, as of April the 26th, you can see still in the old city of Toronto, the Liberals doing well. That's Toronto, St. Paul's, that is a toss-up right now. But, when you look at the Oakvilles, the Mississaugas, that the Liberals still have the advantage. But, the thing is the Conservatives in the suburban areas, especially north of Toronto, doing really well.
And again, this is your polling research as of April 26th. I just want to remind our viewers of that. All right, let's get out of Ontario now, head right over to the West Coast, zero in on British Columbia, and taking a look at the Metro Vancouver area. Nick, we know this province really crucial for the NDP tonight, but your polling showing otherwise.
Yeah, the thing is that when we look at British Columbia, it's a toss-up between the Conservatives and the Liberals. The Conservatives do very well in the interior, but when you zoom into the lower mainland, you can see the Liberals benefiting from those three-way splits and doing really well in Vancouver. You can see the NDP, we have declared for one. Jagmeet Singh's riding, if you look at it, at risk in terms of him potentially losing in Vancouver.
Will be incredible. We're keeping a close eye on that. Moving over to Vancouver Island, Nick, a lot of Conservative territory here, but not if we head to the south.
No, when you get in the south, we can see Elizabeth May's riding of Sandwich Gulf Islands and also Esquimalt for the Liberals. So we see Elizabeth May's riding potentially at play, challenged by the Conservatives. The Conservatives doing really well on the island, at least in the latest round of research.
Okay, and I want to remind our viewers of this is what it looked like at dissolution. So we just did a major flip here, Nick.
Yeah, wow, absolutely. You can see the Conservatives improving their fortunes on the island. And, the thing is for the New Democrats, this is where it really is that, Vancouver Island and the lower mainland will make or break the New Democrats and Jagmeet Singh. If the Conservatives pick up seats, that'll be good news for Pierre Poilevre.
All right, Nick, we'll see how this polling plays out as the evening goes on. We'll send it back over to the studio.
All right, Heather, Nick, thank you so much for that. Island story is very interesting as well. Vancouver Island, 6 of the 7 seats were held by the NDP. And in BC, 12 of the 24 seats were held by the NDP. So whatever happens in that province, but particularly on Vancouver Island, could determine what the impact is on Jagmeet Singh's political future.
Yeah, their strategy really entailed focusing on those incumbent seats as well. We want to turn to some of the other parties to start off and check in on the headquarters, how things are going. We'll start with Mike Couture. He's with the Liberals in Ottawa. If you look at any of the polling aggregators right now, the popular vote that the Conservatives have at this juncture in Atlantic Canada, Mike, is lower than was anticipated. The Conservatives is higher than what was projected. What are you hearing on the ground there about how much they're reading into that?
Yeah, I think they're all looking at these results and waiting. They continue to say that this is early times right now, Vashi. But you'd have to think by looking at that and the number of times that the Liberals have been out to Atlantic Canada, you just have to think about how Mark Carney went out there and had that sort of impromptu street hockey game in one of the laneways there. And that was in Colchester, Cumberland, and that riding that they were hoping to take. You have to think that they might be just a little bit disappointed right now as they are seeing some of these numbers come up. I did reach out to the campaign, ask where Mr. Carney is and how he is feeling. He is watching these results come in from a hotel in downtown Ottawa, and somebody from his campaign did tell me that he's confident with the campaign that they've run, and they believe it's now up to Canadians to make their voices heard, and they will continue to be watching these results. But certainly a number of staffers that I've been trying to talk to here, asking them about them, and they said, look, we've put in the work at this point. Now it is up to the Canadians to decide, and it is, this going to be a very long night. I think everybody in this room, staff included, believe that it will be a very long night, and they are hoping that these numbers continue to shift in their direction. Vashi.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. Very much a wait and see thing. I'm looking at some results coming in from Central Nova, of course, long held by the McKay dynasty. Sean Fraser in a fight for his seat at this point.
This is a dramatic story.
It is a dramatic story. Sean Fraser, minister who held two big portfolios under the Trudeau government, in particular immigration and housing at some pretty crucial times for each of those files, said he was quitting. Then Mark Carney came on board. He said he's coming back right as the election started. And now it's not a given at all for him.
And that's what makes this election so exciting. Mike said this is going to be a long night. Certainly some very, very interesting storylines right across the country. Let's go to Abigail Beeman, who is with the Conservatives now. Abigail.
Hi, I'm glad you brought up Central Nova because I was with the Conservatives in Central Nova at that rally where they had both Elmer McKay and Peter MacKay speaking, giving Pierre Poilevre an endorsement, and it was really interesting to watch that on the ground. They also invoked late Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who held that riding as well, and you really paint the picture of that longtime Conservative stronghold, but held for the last since 2015 by Sean Fraser. And interesting to watch this race now. I remember speaking to one of the Conservative supporters there who told me that the local Conservative candidate there had told him he thought it would be a 50-50 shot at best. So I guess exceeding expectations at this point. But again, the same message from the Conservative campaign at this moment on the ground. Atlantic Canada overall far exceeding their expectations, and that's putting some wind in their sails for the start of the night, although of course acknowledging that things are still early and they're still feeling confident about Ontario when those results come in, and eventually BC as well. And like Mike Lukatour, I've also asked about party leader Pierre Poilevre, and like Mark Carney, he's also at a downtown Ottawa hotel watching the results with his family. We've asked for some images of that. It seems unlikely that we will get them, but we will keep you posted about that, and have asked for some updates about how he's feeling at this point in the night, again watching the results with his family, and a room here that's anxious for more results to come in. Back to you.
All right, and we'll see if that optimism, that trend line continues as the votes come in several other provinces and territories in about 22 minutes time now.
Yeah, is this just a microcosm of what's to come, or it's sort of an anomaly? That will certainly be the question as those big results do start to trickle in. We'll head over to BC, get a check-in on New Democrats and their headquarters with Judy Trinh. Judy, I know their focus is far west and their polls close much later, but what do they think of these early results?
Well, I can tell you that there is a disappointment, not that they were expecting to win anything in Atlantic Canada, but they were expecting to have a better showing than what they have, what the results have shown. And what I can also tell you is that they're watching what is going on in Southwest Ontario very carefully. And the reason for that is that the NDP say that they have more than, they have endorsements from unions that represent more than 1 million voters. So that is strong union support. We know that Southwestern Ontario is the manufacturing heart of Canada. So whether or not they remain NDP in some of those ridings in Windsor and London, that will show exactly where the support is turning. Or did they shift because of the trade war in support of Mark Carney, or did they shift towards the Conservatives because of affordability issues? And I can also tell you that I'm not sure if our viewers are aware that in terms of where CTV reporters are assigned, that we rotate between parties. We cover the Liberals, we cover the Conservatives, and the NDP. So we get a sense of what is going on. And what I can tell you is that last weekend, I was with the Conservatives, and I was in these communities in the Greater Vancouver area. And when I speak to these immigrant communities, as I was at the Visaki Festival, which had more than 500,000 Indo-Canadians, basically many of them within the Sikh community, take part in this festival. And what they were telling me was that they were concerned about cost of living. They were concerned about crime issues. They were concerned about housing. Those are issues that skew very closely to the Conservative platform. So are we going to see a shift of NDP to the Conservatives? So that is something that perhaps is an underlying factor that that the polls may not reveal, that the internal polling of the Conservatives may have shown that strength. However, the NDP remain confident that they will maintain party status. Vashi and Omar, they are confident that they should get between 12 and 15 seats according to their own internal polling. So it's left to be seen.
All right. Thanks, Judy. Appreciate it. Checking in there at NDP headquarters over in British Columbia.
Lots at stake for the NDP. Jeremy Charron is following the Bloc Québécois in Montreal tonight, and also lots at stake for the Bloc Québécois in Quebec. Jeremy, I'm thinking of a riding in particular, such as La Salle et Marc Verdun, where in that by-election last year, you had a situation where the Bloc Québécois was able to steal it from the Liberals. They obviously want to retain that win, but they're struggling heading into the polling for tonight.
Absolutely, Omar. That riding is a perfect example of kind of some of the struggles or the battles the Bloc Québécois expect to face tonight. La Salle et Marc Verdun, a seat that flipped in a by-election to the Bloc. And, you know, many experts, pollsters weighing in that was largely due to Justin Trudeau's unpopularity here in the province. That seat, most experts now expect to return to the Liberals. Early days here in Quebec in terms of results. We're starting to see some early results roll in. I'm looking already at a very tight race in Gaspésie-les-Îles-de-la-Madeleine, where the Liberal incumbent is in a very tight race with the Bloc candidate. Only about a 30-point difference there, a 30-vote difference at the moment. Early days, of course, but the Bloc supporters here are waving their Quebec flags. They're excited. They're optimistic. And the message I keep hearing, you know, they've been rolling through speakers here on stage and on the video screen. They have been, you know, pushing over the last few days, and the leader, Yves-François Blanchet, has. They feel as though the Liberals will form government, and so they have been driving home that they need to send as many Bloc MPs to Ottawa as possible. That has been the message.
All right, Jeremy Charron at Bloc Québécois headquarters there. Thank you.
We're just looking, keeping our eye on some of these results. We are less than 20 minutes away, just 17 minutes away from the bulk of polls closing across the country in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nunavut, and Northwest Territories, 267 ridings in all. We're going to start to see whether some of what has emerged in Atlantic Canada, you know, transpires in other parts of the country. I'm just looking at this battle we were talking about in Central Nova. Abigail bringing up some interesting points about the Conservative focus there, the McKay's sort of legacy in that riding. But Sean Fraser and Bryce Jenkins, the Conservative candidate, neck and neck. Of course, Sean Fraser, a minister under the Trudeau government, and the incumbent in the riding. Who better to give us reaction to that dogfight than our Todd Battis, our senior anchor rather, at CTV News in Atlantic Canada. Todd, what's your read on this?
Well, Vashi, this is really interesting. And, you know, just in the days leading up to this, Pierre Poilevre had not made a visit to Nova Scotia. So when he did come late in the campaign, the one rally he held was in Central Nova. And you saw Elmer McKay and Peter McKay, and they really are the elder statesmen of northern Nova Scotia. They came out and rallied in his support, endorsed him, and that was late in the campaign. So it'd be interesting to know if that had really an effect that may be giving Bryson Jenkins a bit of a push now. He's starting to separate a little bit, although, as you mentioned, it is quite close. But that would be quite something, and the Conservatives would be happy about that. I just want to mention something on the point that Judy Trin made about the NDP. In the Halifax riding, it was a vacant riding, and there was to be a by-election before the federal election was called, and the NDP had high hopes of winning that. Their candidate, Lisa Roberts, is currently third in the city of Halifax. It's already been declared elected by CTV News for the Liberal candidate there. But that gives you a sense of what's happening to the NDP vote in the Maritimes. But we'll keep an eye on that one in Central Nova as well. Cumberland Colchester, Dr. Stephen Ellis for the Conservatives is in a real tight race, and he has maintained a slight lead. Okay, let's check out what's going on in Quebec and hand things over to Matsumi.
Todd, the Conservatives had high hopes in Quebec, and I'm sure they're watching the results coming from Atlantic Canada with a lot of interest. At one point, they were even hoping for a blue wave here in Quebec, but then came Mark Carney and Donald Trump, and we know what happened then. The polls have the Conservatives third in this province, behind the Liberals in the Bloc. Their only stronghold is in the Quebec City region. That's where they're hoping for gains tonight by taking seats from the Bloc. Now, the Conservatives haven't won a riding on the island of Montreal since 1988. They've got their sights set on Mount Royal. Now, that's a riding with a large Jewish population. The Conservatives have Neil Oberman. He's a lawyer known for supporting the Jewish community. He's challenging the Liberal incumbent there, Anthony Housefather, very popular there, also known for his strong support of the Jewish community and for English language rights. But the Conservatives have put a lot of energy and effort to try to get this riding. We go to Ottawa now. Patricia?
Matsumi, thank you. One riding we're keeping a close eye on here this evening, the suburb of Canada, home of the Canadian Tire Centre, which some of you hockey fans may be familiar with. It's where incumbent Jenna Sudds is looking to hold her seat up against Conservative Greg Kung, NDP candidate Melissa Simon, Jennifer Purdy with the Greens as well. Now, Sudds is a former Ottawa City Council, replaced Karen McCrimmon back in 2021 and served as Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. I was actually there on this night in 2021 doing an interview with Jenna when CTV declared her elected, so got to break the news to her, which is one of the fun moments really with reporting on election night. Now, this is a riding that has voted Liberal the last 3 consecutive elections, but it has undergone some boundary changes, those boundary changes that Mark Carney was unaware of at one point, sort of swapped some land with those 2 ridings, Nepean and Canada. And the margin of victory for the Liberals in this riding has tightened in each of the past 3 elections. So it'll be an interesting one to watch tonight. Over to Toronto now, and Michelle.
Patricia, Toronto and the greater Toronto area has millions of voters and a whole bunch of seats, nearly 60. And among those seats, there are a number of potential swing seats. We know that the Conservatives, one that they're targeting is Aurora, Oak Ridge's Richmond Hill. This one had the slimmest margin of victory for the Liberals in this part of the country in 2021, just over 3%. And the Conservatives have a solid candidate in Kostas Menegakis. He was an MP in a neighboring riding of Richmond Hill. He's looking to get back to Ottawa, but Leah Taylor-Roy, she's hoping for a second term, and now she has this renewed Liberal Party behind her. But if the Conservatives manage to flip this one blue, might this signal success on the national level? We know that Pierre Poilevre and Mark Carney have campaigned heavily in the GTA, and it really might boil down to which of their messages resonated more, Carney's experience, not experiment, or Pierre Poilievre's message of change. The polls close here in just over 10 minutes, so we're going to be getting some results. It'll be really interesting. But for now, let's go over to Calgary.
Thanks, Michelle. Now, we know that Alberta isn't exactly Liberal territory. In fact, they've only ever held 4 seats in this province. The first time was in 2015. That was Justin Trudeau's first term. Then you have to go all the way back to 1968 under his dad, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. But there is one riding that we're watching tonight that could be a pickup. So this is Calgary Skyview. George Chahal won this for the Liberals in 2021, but he's not running there this time. He's running in McKnight, which is a new riding. That's because most of old Skyview is now in new McKnight. The Liberal candidate in Skyview is a local business person. He's not particularly well known. He's not going to have the same kind of name recognition that Chahal did. But what may benefit him is some general disgruntlement. Did I just make a word up there? Toward the Conservatives right now. And I'll tell you why. It's because the Conservative Party appointed both of the candidates for McKnight and Skyview. And there were a number of potential candidates who were hoping to run in those two ridings. They had spent about a year fundraising and door knocking and signing up members. And a lot of their voters have been telling us that they're really angry about this. So Skyview might be a place that could be a pickup for the Liberals tonight because people are upset with the Conservatives. We'll be watching it. Let's go to Mijung in Vancouver.
Thank you, Tara. Well, we have seen, as you were mentioning earlier, the Conservative support actually higher than expected in Atlantic Canada. If that trend continues, the Conservatives could have a good chance of flipping some seats here in BC. One of them is Similkameen, South Okanagan. In 2021, it was a close race with the Conservatives less than 2 points behind the NDP. We're also watching Richmond East, Steveston. Now, this has a history of flipping between Liberal and Conservative. Richmond residents have been quite vocal about their concerns over public drug use, safe consumption sites. So we'll see if the Conservative stance on drug addiction will sway Richmond voters away from the Liberal incumbent. Nanaimo Ladysmith, also one to watch. Last time it was a tight three-way race. This time it's actually a four-way race with the Green candidate Paul Manley in the mix. Crime, homelessness, big issues in Nanaimo as well. Will that shift the riding from green to blue? BC voters have about 40 minutes left before polls close. Back to you.
All right, Mijung, thank you. And before that, of course, a big wave of results expected in about 10 minutes' time, certainly from Ontario, which is a massive battleground. And I'll be looking at sort of those early results from obviously the GTA, the 905, but also Peterborough, which is a bellwether. The way Peterborough goes, so too does the rest of the country most times. So that'll be one to watch.
Yeah, and some interesting ridings that Michelle was talking about, particularly in Aurora, that were very, very narrow wins for the Liberals in the last election. The Conservatives looking to flip those. That's if they can start to flip the 905, it's a different narrative as well. I think we can swing over now to Heather, who will probably have a more in-depth explanation of what I just said.
Hey, thanks so much, Vashi. Yes, we are actually going to be taking a look at the people who are casting a ballot and the people who are electing those heading to Ottawa in this next term, right, Nick?
Yep.
And we're going to be looking at advanced polls. Of course, we're talking about voter engagement. Everybody was saying how high engagement was during this election campaign, and it really showed with the early voter turnout. I will just note the ridings right now. We have the Liberals leading and elected in more than 20, I believe that was. Is 22, that was, excuse me. 7.3 million people voted, Nick, in advanced polls, 25% increase.
Yeah, that's really a good number. You know, the more people that vote, the better. But you know what, Heather, this is a big headache for pollsters and people wanting to project things because, you know, the thing is, those people at the advanced polls, the Conservatives usually do well. We don't know whether they are motivated Liberals and Conservatives or whether it's the Conservative ground machine, which has been very effective and is very well organized and very well funded, delivering the vote.
Okay, Nick, I only have 10 seconds left, but I do know that three really important ridings in the top 5.
Absolutely. Three leaders. You can see Pierre Poilevre, Mark Carney, and Elizabeth May. Interestingly, all in the top 5 for advanced poll votes.
What an incredible turnout. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Heather. Those advanced votes, very curious to see as well. Sort of when they are counted, when they are fully counted, we're trying to get that information. We don't know exactly how much of that vote, for example, even in Atlantic Canada, has been accounted for. That could end up changing some of the vote totals, certainly, and skewing things in a different direction than we've seen so far, but that remains to be determined. So that'll be a key factor, not only in Atlantic Canada, Omar, but moving throughout the country as well.
That's a massive number, as Heather just pointed out, 7.3 million. It shows of engagement there is in this election. And at the end of the night, it'll be interesting to see what the voter turnout was right across the country, to see if it was historic given the threats that we've been seeing from the U.S. or not. So, of course, a lot of data coming in after election night as well.
Yeah, I think the projection, if the advance vote were to hold, let's say, and be extrapolated out, would then be something in the neighborhood of 70%, which is we haven't seen since I believe it was 1993. I think I can throw over to Anne-Marie, who is going to talk to our panel about some of that stuff.
Well, yeah, and so that's what's a really interesting point, Vashi, is you have this giant surprise box that nobody knows what's inside. And a reminder to everybody at home, I know a lot of people have just gone through provincial elections in this last year. They're used to those results coming in fast because those are electronic. So to remind everybody at home,
federal ballots are counted by hand, which is why we've got sort of this long waiting period while we start to see numbers come in. The same will hold true for advanced polls counted by hand, but they were counted either an hour or 2 hours before polls closing. Some ridings, I understand, are even waiting until all the ballots were in. So that's why we don't have this number. But back to this surprise box of all of these votes, this almost record turnout of voting. Like, how can this change things? And what are the parties anticipating that's inside? Rana, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I think of a new voter, I think of someone who's never voted before.
Sure.
And what's motivating them. A lot of them are younger, and I think they're coming off the sidelines because of the anger around the decline of our economy. We have a productivity problem, 6 quarters of productivity decline. We have 6.8% unemployment in this country. We are one of the most unaffordable places in the OECD to buy a house. 355% increase. That's how much it costs young people, even if they graduate with a degree or a trade skill.
Right.
They can never catch up when it comes to their wage, the growth of wages, to actually afford to buy a house. I think that's what's in that surprise box. People that are saying, this economy has left me behind, and I am motivated to get out and vote.
I can tell you, I voted in the advance polls, and it wasn't full of young people. It was full of a lot of middle-aged and older people.
Older rustic voters.
Well, no, not necessarily rustic, not in my neighborhood, but I would say it was older voters who, like my age and older, who were thinking to themselves, this is an incredibly consequential election, and we want to make sure the person who gets elected is someone we can count on and trust. So, I mean, I think the thing about the surprise box that's interesting, though, is we don't know which ridings where it's already been included, where we don't know which ridings where it's been counted, and so you take a riding like Central Nova. This could make a huge difference.
I'll give you a case.
And so we can't, it really makes the predictions difficult to understand.
2011, Orange Wave in Quebec, NDP does really well. Mark Garneau conceded defeat in Westmount, one of the safest Liberal ridings, but he eventually won once they counted the advance polls, because we had zero ground game in a lot of these ridings. We had very few members there, and especially in a place like Westmount. So once the Liberals had applied their ground game, they filled the advance poll, they counted up, they won considerably. So there can be real surprises as you open up the surprise boxes.
Arjun, I'll let you.
Yeah, no, this is one that I was really interested in. I was surprised, so many people coming in the advance polls. So as I was talking, and now that I'm out, people are kind of opening up more to me. Again, the fear factor with Trump, right? I think Canadians wanted to really make have a say, be part of, the election coming up, get in early, make a choice, and show their patriotism in making a choice, regardless of who they're going to choose. I think that was, my opinion, probably why we had larger numbers in the advance poll.
Surprises make for an interesting night, especially on election night. So we cannot wait to find out, what's already been opened, where we see the effects of that. Vashti Nomel, we'll send it back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne-Marie. We've got just a couple minutes, guys, until the polls close in much of Canada. Scott, your thoughts on advance voting and how it may impact things?
Why don't I give you a specific example, just to lighten this conversation up. So we're watching Central Nova very closely, obviously. Sean Fraser's riding, very marquee riding in Atlantic. He's, behind by a handful of votes. I'm told by his riding that of the advance polls, 3 out of 25 of the advance polls have been counted, but only 3 out of the 25. So that gives you an indication of what Tom talking about, how you can come charging from behind. So when all of those are counted, my suspicion is Sean Fraser will win this riding because he's been in all 3 of the polls that have been counted from the advance, he's been well ahead. So we may see that phenomenon occur in a couple more of these Atlantic ridings. And again, popular vote overall and all the votes that have been cast, Liberals are ahead by 11%. So I'd be careful about extrapolating what we've seen so far and thinking that, the Conservatives are going to make massive gains on them.
The good thing is we only have about 30 seconds left until we know.
That's even better.
Until we start to know, I should say. Last 30 seconds to you, Corey.
Yeah, well, we do have a little bit of insight into who's voted in the advance polls because there's been a lot of polling done of the electorate and asked the question, did you vote in the advance polls? And the data on that shows that it hasn't been that different than what we would typically see in an election. A lot more older voters voting than younger voters. And now that could be because it was over a long weekend. I don't know. We'll see. But we didn't see anything really surprising, or at least I didn't, in terms of the demographic complexion of those voters. It's probably more a reflection of who had a better ground game in a given riding, to the point that that Tom made earlier. Campaigns with more organization tend to do better in the advance polls.
And we shall see shortly. Kathleen, I'll get back to you in a moment because we're just about a few seconds away from all of those 267 polls closing.
Yeah, we're about to get more of these political blanks being filled just moments from now. We're just getting prepared for the biggest wave of poll closings across the entire country. And within a matter of minutes, in fact, we'll have results from hundreds of ridings all the way west to Alberta. Stay with us. This is CTV Election 2025.
This is the most consequential vote of our lifetimes. Donald Trump wants to break us.
We will build out the vision of an East-West nation that John A. brought to this country.
We're going to fight back and defend those jobs. We're going to fight back and defend our country.
We will support what is right for Quebec.
A vision where housing is a right, not a luxury.
CTV Election 2025. Once again, Omar Sachedina and Vashi Capellos.
Welcome back to the heart of CTV News election headquarters, where the polls have now closed. Good evening. The tension is high, and so are the stakes. Canada's next government is beginning to take shape.
The party's final sprint for support all comes down to this: the end of a kind of unprecedented stretch. The unpredictability, as we've seen so far, though, far from over.
Here in studio, we're lucky to be surrounded by some of Canada's finest political minds as we examine just exactly how we got here and what happens next.
Heather Butts is with us with a look at how things are standing at this hour. Heather, I'll throw it over to you. Where do things stand?
Vashi, thanks so much. What an exciting evening. We've already seen those polls close in Atlantic Canada earlier this evening. Then, of course, now a massive portion of our country closing just now. But let's remind people of where we were at dissolution. So the standings at dissolution, the Liberals had 152 seats, the Conservatives 120, the Bloc Québécois 33, the NDP 24, the Green Party 2 seats in the House of Commons. Now, we do have a few more seats up for grabs this evening. That is because there is 1 additional seat in British Columbia, 3 in Alberta, and 1 more in Ontario. That is because of population growth, demographic change, and redistribution of ridings. So we have 5 additional seats. So we once had 338 members in the House of Commons, and that this evening we will have 343 elected and heading to Ottawa. But of course, the main number that we are keeping a very close eye on this evening is 172. That is the number required for majority. Of course, the governments, the parties vying for that number this evening. Now, let's take a look at the House projections. This is from the CTV News decision desk. Right now, projecting that the Liberals could get a range of seats anywhere from 138 to 176, perhaps crossing that majority marker of 172. The projections for the Conservatives getting a range of anywhere from 114 to 148. Now, of course, these numbers are based on polling data, historical analysis, and a lot of number crunching goes into this. But these numbers will shift throughout the evening as your votes are counted. We'll, of course, keep a very close eye on the NDP and the Bloc Québécois. Right now, projecting anywhere from 15 to 38 seats for the NDP this evening. But again, those numbers will change as your votes are counted. This is a forecast, and the range will ebb and flow this evening as parties perform. 172, though, that is the magic marker, if you will, the number that we're keeping a very close eye on as this evening unfolds. Back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. That's Heather Butts with some early projections. And the big news right now is that polls in much of the country, the bulk of ridings, the majority of them, 267, have just closed. I want to throw up, it's very early, like we were a little while ago with Atlantic Canada, very few polls reporting, but some initial results. For example, in François-Philippe Champagne's riding, he is currently the Minister of Finance. He too decided, like Mélanie Joly, not to run for the leadership of the party once Mark Carney announced he would intend to do so. He has a very small lead lead there. We can throw it over to some more results.
Yeah, from Les Pays d'en Haut, the Liberal has a lead of 21 votes right now. Again, just two of the 236 polls reporting, because again, these polls just closed about 4 minutes ago, in fact. In Gaspésie, les Îles de la Madeleine, in Listigouche, this was one of the first Quebec polls to close. You see there that, again, the Liberal incumbent is trailing the Bloc Québécois candidate there, Alexis Duchesne, who has the lead right now.
In Essex, by the way, glad I didn't have to pronounce that riding. Very impressive. Chris Lewis with the lead, the incumbent, the Conservative incumbent in Essex. You can see, again, just one poll reporting there, but the results from provinces where polls have closed are starting to come in, including very quickly here, a lead for David McGuinty, currently serving as the Minister of Public Safety. He's the incumbent in the riding, the McGuinty family, of course, well known in the province of Ontario. Leslyn Lewis, the incumbent in Haldimand, Norfolk. She is kind of one of the front bench people in some respects for the Conservative Party. She ran for the leadership a number of years ago. Just one poll reporting there, but she does hold a lead of 48 votes.
And the reason this next batch is so significant, as we mentioned, is just because of the rich seat count there is, right? We know that there are 343 seats up for grabs. And the region we're talking about now, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nunavut, Northwest Territories, represent 267 of those 343. So things are about to get extremely, extremely interesting. In Yellowhead, we've got some more results here. We know that the Conservative has a lead of 145 votes. Again, quite early in this region of the country, just one of the 252 polls reporting, Vashi.
And I think do we have some additional results coming in? I think so. Yeah, we're looking over. Oh, now we're into Alberta. Lethbridge, Rachel Thomas is the incumbent there. Public safety critic, among a host of other things for the Conservative Party. She's, at one poll reporting, has a lead, not a surprise. Michelle Rempel-Garner, 6 polls reporting a commanding lead of nearly 1,000 votes for her. I would be shocked if anything different happened in that riding. It's a very safe Conservative seat, and she's a very well-known member of Parliament in Calgary.
In Surrey Moose Mountain, we see here that the Conservative is leading substantially by a vote lead of 407 votes. Again, just one of the 211 polls reporting there. Battleford's Lloydminster, Meadow Lake, Rosemary Falk, the Conservative incumbent, with a lead of 1,500 votes right now.
And Alberta, another one of those places, and we heard this earlier from Tara Nelson, looking to see if there's any movement in some of the ridings the Liberals had hope. Hey, if things are as good as we think they might be, we could swing there. So far, no evidence of that, but obviously very, very early. And Lloydminster, not one of the ones they thought they could pick up, but Lethbridge, perhaps south of there.
Yeah, Alberta, obviously, as we know, Conservative stronghold, but we'll see if there are any gains that other parties are able to make there. Again, those results just trickling in as the polls have just closed about 7 minutes ago in the bulk of the country. We will be bringing those to you, but this is significant, this batch of results, Vashi.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, basically the path to government has to go through Ontario and Quebec, and the path to a majority certainly has to go through both of those provinces for whomever is able to secure government. I think particularly in certain parts of Ontario, we've heard it from many people tonight, but the Greater Toronto area, like if this is not going to be what the Liberals thought it was going to be, we're going to know there, right? The Conservatives will make significant gains there, or some gains there that will indicate something different happening in Ontario than perhaps the polls had predicted.
And so a couple of dominant storylines today, of course, who will win, who will form the next government, whether it's a majority or a minority. We could find that out momentarily. But then the other, storylines that come below that are the political futures of the other leaders. What happens on Vancouver Island with the Green Party's Elizabeth May, and also with Jagmeet Singh. We saw just moments ago that he was struggling in that Burnaby riding of his. So whatever happens in British Columbia, where obviously that is a party where they have the bulk of their seats, that will have a significant impact on the future of that leader as well. So lots of skin in the game.
Also struggling, Maxime Bernier, just one poll, the leader of the People's Party of Canada, currently in 4th place in that riding.
But there's so much skin in the game for all of these leaders. Obviously, Mark Carney wants to keep his job as Prime Minister. Pierre Poilievre wants his job. And then we talked about the others as well. Again, this riding of Beauce, where Maxime Bernier is in last place right now. Again, one poll reporting of 245 with the Conservative candidate leading there.
And we keep our eyes peeled for any additional results as they come in. I think there are some more. It's going to be a trickle for the beginning part because there's lots to count. There's also the huge advance vote portion. We've been talking all night about a record of 7.3 million Canadians. That all has to be counted as well. We're looking here at Ajax. We're getting closer to the Greater Toronto Area. Just one poll reporting there with the Liberal leading Greg Brady, Jennifer McKelvey leading Greg Brady. We'll keep an eye, of course, on other ridings in the GTA. There are some specific ones where the Liberals eked out a victory, for example, in the last election. I mentioned Aurora before, where you're going to want to see if the Conservatives are able to flip there and what story that tells. The primary thing that I think we're watching for right now is there was some surprise in Atlantic Canada. The entire popular vote we don't think has been counted because of advance votes. But the idea that Sean Fraser's in a battle for his seat, the idea that the Liberals are underperforming polling projections for them in Atlantic Canada in the aggregate. The Conservatives are doing the converse. They're outperforming. The key question now throughout the next round of results is whether that translates, whether that is a trend or becomes a trend, because that will have a very different impact on the outcome.
And Heather had the floor, the ceilings for each of those parties just minutes ago. And even at the best case scenario for the Liberals right now, and again, the caveat there being that as the votes are counted, these floors and ceilings could change. But I believe that she had for the Libs was 178. So that is past majority territory, but not that much past. 172 is the number that we are looking for, majority territory. So we'll see if, you know, some of these trend lines that we've been seeing in Atlantic Canada develop through the rest of the country, and what these other ridings, 267 of them, tell us in the minutes to come, because a substantial amount of the votes are about to be counted. And by the way, these are all hand-counted ballots. We don't have computer systems or machines in this country to be able to do that. So at times, it could take in certain ridings longer than others, particularly in the riding of Carleton, Pierre Poilievre's riding. We'll see and bring you those results as soon as they happen. But let's go right now to Geneviève Beauchemin, who is with the Liberals in Ottawa tonight. And Jen, what's the sentiment there right now?
Well, certainly it's not that workers are not concerned about the situation at Atlantic Canada. Certainly they're looking at those numbers. But what we're told is that they're looking, of course, much more closely right now at those numbers in Ontario, those numbers in BC. Vashi was talking about the fact earlier that a majority of government here goes through Ontario. They need Ontario, of course, to form a government. And that would be a very key part. But we're always told that there's the government in Ontario and the majority goes through Quebec. And those are the numbers they're looking at very closely. Right now, the atmosphere is changing a little bit here because people are starting to arrive. As those polls closed, the doors opened here. And so we're seeing some workers, some people who were volunteers trickling in, talking about what it's been like on the ground. We'd been told that with the party that, you know, they wanted those volunteers out there. They didn't expect anybody to be here much before 9:30. They wanted them to be out there working every single door to ensure that there would be coming, that there would be as many votes as possible. But now those people are starting to arrive here and they're talking about what it's been like. There's still a lot of enthusiasm. There's still a lot of people who said, look, you know, a few months ago, this was such a different situation. Now we've been door knocking for several weeks and we're talking to people. There's a lot more enthusiasm. We've been feeling it on the ground. We know that this is happening. We're just waiting to see exactly how that reflects in the numbers up there. But, you know, they've got their red dresses on. We've seen people with hockey shirts on, people coming here and are ready to celebrate here. They're just right now looking very closely at those numbers and seeing just, you know, just what kind of a party they may have tonight.
All right, still lots at stake, and we'll see what happens when those results start coming in.
Yeah, we're staying very focused on that ticker at the bottom to see where things stand. Big, huge number of ridings that will certainly inform our ability to be able to say what kind of government this is and who forms it. Let's check in with Abigail Beeman. She's with the Conservatives at this moment in time. Abigail, you've been saying they were kind of happy with the results in Atlantic Canada, surprised in a good way. What are they telling you about what they think their prospects are in Ontario, in Quebec, and some of the other bigger provinces that are less easy to predict than, for example, Alberta and Saskatchewan for them?
Right. Well, you know, you're telling me that you are closely watching that ticker, and I can tell you that everybody in this room is doing the exact same thing. When you look at the shots of the crowd here, we have people with their arms crossed, 10 size on the screen. I've switched over to these headphone, microphone, earphone situation because it just got so loud in here the second there was anything positive sounding about those new results coming in. So this is a room that is very anxious for some good news. But to your question about what the campaigns are saying, or what the campaign is saying, so we have been told that Ontario is they're expecting a positive result. They have less to say so much about Quebec behind the scenes, but in Ontario, which is obviously incredibly important, we are told that they are expecting expecting good things. So that is what we'll be watching. Although I've been texting furiously with a number of campaign sources and nobody offering up anything new in the last few minutes, because I think